Welcome back, everybody, to the Deep Dive. This time, we're going deep into the world of crime.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, we've got a really interesting mix of sources for this one. We've got historical accounts, we've got psychological studies, even a look at the role of schools.
Wow.
So get ready for some aha moments. We're going to uncover some really surprising insights about, what leads people down that criminal path. What makes a criminal?
Yeah, it's amazing how much our understanding of crime has changed over time, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what was considered a serious offense a long time ago might be completely normal today, like weird.
That's a great point. So where do we even begin with all this? How about we look back and see what we can learn from the past about how ideas of crime have changed?
Yeah, let's go back, way back. How about ancient Babylon?
Okay, way back.
Hammurabi's Code.
Oh, Hammurabi's Code. Okay, so for listeners who aren't familiar, remind us, what is that?
Well, back then, crime was seen as an offense against the gods, right?
Against the gods, okay.
And the punishments were brutal and swift. It was a totally different world back then.
Oh, I bet. Okay, so Hammurabi's Code, that's the eye for an eye kind of system, right?
Yeah, precisely. So imagine, being exiled from your entire community just for stealing, I don't know, like a loaf of bread.
For stealing bread. Wow, okay.
The stakes were so high back then.
Exile for stealing bread. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That really puts things in perspective when we think about our own justice system today.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like these ancient societies had a very, very different view of crime and how to deal with it.
Absolutely. And, if we fast forward a little bit, move into medieval Europe, the church becomes really powerful, right? And sin and crime become almost the same thing.
Interesting. So even a minor thing you did wrong could have some pretty serious consequences, especially if the church got involved.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
But then along comes the Enlightenment period, right?
Yeah.
And things start to shift again. New ideas about individual rights pop up, and that leads to more formal legal systems and eventually prisons. So that's where the whole idea of locking people up as punishment really starts to take hold.
Right, exactly. And then, bam, the Industrial Revolution hits.
Of course.
And we see rapid urbanization, which leads to new types of crime, like organized crime and white-collar crime. And then we see the birth of criminology as a field, trying to make sense of it all.
It's like crime itself is constantly evolving and changing right alongside society.
Precisely. Fast forward to today, we have globalization, which just adds another layer of complexity to it all.
Oh, man.
Now we have crimes that cross borders.
Like what?
Drug trafficking, cybercrime. It's a whole new ballgame with global consequences.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
So we've seen how the very definition of crime has really evolved over centuries. But let's get a little more personal, shall we?
Sure.
Why do people commit crimes in the first place? What makes someone take that bad road, as we've been calling it? Is it as simple as just making a bad choice?
Well, our sources actually paint a way more nuanced picture than that.
I bet.
It's not just a black and white issue. It's not just good versus bad. It's a whole web of factors that come together, and they sort of contribute to criminal behavior.
Okay, so it's more complicated than just saying someone's a criminal. What are some of these factors that our sources highlight?
Well, socioeconomics is huge. Poverty and lack of opportunity, those can be really powerful drivers.
That makes sense. If someone's struggling to survive, then doing something illegal might feel like the only option, even if it's a risky one.
Exactly. For a lot of people in poor communities, crime isn't about being a bad person. It's about survival.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I see. Okay, so we've talked about how poverty, lack of opportunity, those things can really create this breeding ground for crime. But how does that actually translate into someone choosing crime as that easy way out?
Well, when you're desperate, right, really desperate, let's say you're struggling with addiction or you're about to be evicted, your decision-making processes can get really distorted.
So you're not really thinking about the long-term consequences. You're just thinking about right now.
Exactly. Your focus just narrows to immediate needs, like how do I get money for drugs? How do I get food on the table? The future just fades away. And crime, even with all the risks, it can seem like the only way forward.
It's almost like your brain is kind of hijacked by this feeling that you have to do something right now.
Yeah. And we can't forget about addiction. Addiction is huge. Substances can really cloud your judgment and lead to, impulsive behaviors, risky behaviors that you wouldn't even think about if you weren't using.
So addiction kind of becomes this driving force, pushing you towards crime, just to feed your habit. even if it means hurting yourself or other people in the process.
Yeah, it's a tragic cycle, and sometimes people really believe they have no other choice. Like, imagine someone who's suicidal but also just filled with rage, and they want to lash out at the world.
Oh, that's a scary thought. That despair can push someone to violence against others, even as like a final act before ending their own life.
It's a tough thing to think about, but it really shows how important mental health is when we're trying to understand why people commit crimes. Sometimes crime is really a symptom of a much deeper struggle.
Yeah, this is heavy stuff. But I think it's important to acknowledge all of this. We really want to try to, figure out how to deal with crime and get to the root of it.
I agree. And there's another factor that we need to consider, and it's a disturbing one, and that's the normalization of violence.
Oh, yeah.
When people are constantly exposed to violence, whether it's in their neighborhood or through the media, it can desensitize them to it.
It's like they slowly lose their empathy and compassion.
Exactly. Violence just becomes a normal part of life, a tool for survival, or even entertainment, which is really messed up. Think about gang warfare. Those young people, they're growing up seeing terrible violence, and it becomes their norm.
It's a terrible cycle. Violence just leads to more violence. To break free from that, you need so much courage and a support system that can offer a different path.
Yeah, you said it. It shows just how powerful these societal forces are. They can really trap people in this web of violence and despair. But let's maybe change gears a bit and talk about something a little more positive, like education.
Okay, yeah.
Can a good school actually prevent someone from going down that road, that path of crime?
That's a great question. We've kind of talked about education as a good thing, but let's dig a little deeper. How can schools really make a difference?
Well, our sources are really clear about this. Schools that create this strong sense of belonging, that provide academic support and encourage good social interactions, they can really, really lower the risk of students getting involved in crime.
So it's about creating an environment where students feel valued
Yeah,
and supported, like they can make good choices.
exactly. There's that saying, it takes a village to raise a child, right?
Right.
A good school can be a big part of that village. They can give guidance and structure during those really important years.
And what about like extracurricular activities
Hmm.
or mentorship programs or leadership opportunities? I mean, those can be so beneficial for kids.
Oh, totally. They give kids a purpose, a direction, help them find what they're passionate about, develop their talents.
Right. It's more than just grades. It's about finding your thing, your passion.
Yeah. But what happens when those school environments are actually negative?
Oh, yeah. That's the flip side.
What if the school is a toxic place to be?
Right. So instead of preventing crime, that might actually be contributing to it. How does that even happen?
Well, think about it. If a child is being bullied all the time or discriminated against, if they feel like they don't belong,
Yeah.
they're going to act out. Or they might just completely withdraw.
They might see the school as the enemy, right?
Yeah.
And they might look for somewhere else to belong, maybe in a gang or some other group that's doing bad things.
Exactly. And if the school doesn't have resources, counselors, social workers, programs to help kids resolve conflicts, those kids, they have nowhere to turn.
It's like they're being set up to fail. Pushed towards the edge of society where crime feels like the only option.
And those zero tolerance policies?
Oh, yeah.
They were meant to make schools safer, but they can really backfire.
How so?
Well, they can lead to really harsh punishments for, minor things. And that pushes kids out of school and right into the justice system.
Right. It's like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. It doesn't really
Yeah.
solve the problem. It just makes it worse.
Exactly. And once those students are expelled, they're more likely to end up on the streets. And then they're exposed to even more risks and temptations.
Yeah. So it's not just about having the right programs. It's about the whole culture of the school, how they treat the students, and what resources they have to help them.
Right. And we can't forget that a school's impact is going to be different depending on the student's gender, age, and background.
Right. So there's no one-size-fits-all solution here.
No, we need to be aware of those differences and, adapt our approach.
So, for example, girls might be more vulnerable to certain types of bullying or pressure, while boys might be more likely to get into fights.
Right. And older students are going to face different things than younger students, like peer pressure and, risky behavior.
And students from certain communities might experience discrimination or just not feel understood, which can make them feel isolated.
Yeah. So it really comes down to creating those safe spaces, supportive spaces, inclusive spaces, where every student feels seen, heard, and valued.
It's a lot to think about. But I think you've made some really important points.
I hope so. Because when schools fail to do those things, the consequences can be devastating, not just for those students, but for everyone.
Okay, we've covered so much ground today, from the history of crime to the psychology of it all. It's been fascinating, but also kind of disturbing.
It's definitely a challenging topic, but it's so important that we talk about it. By understanding how complex crime is, we can start to break down those stereotypes and, work towards some actual solutions.
We've talked about how crime has changed over time and all the different things that can lead someone to criminal behavior, poverty, education, family, and just the fact that there's so much violence in our world.
We also talked about that tough question. Why does crime sometimes seem like the easy way out, even though it's ultimately really destructive?
But I think the most important thing we've talked about is how resilient people are.
Yeah, that's true.
We've seen how positive schools, strong support systems, and just believing that people can change, that can make all the difference in helping someone turn away from crime and build a better life.
Yeah, it's not about good versus bad. It's about understanding that mix of choices and pressures from society that shape people's behavior.
So what do we do now? What can we do as individuals and as a society to deal with all this and create a world where fewer people feel like they have to resort to crime? That's the big question, isn't it? I mean, we've really dug into this and it's complicated. Is there even a way forward?
It's definitely not easy, that's for sure. But I do think that, digging into this like we have, it gives us some places to start. If we want to really make a difference, make a world where people don't feel like they have to turn to crime, well, we got to tackle the things we've been talking about.
Okay, so solutions. What can we actually do to stop crime before it even starts?
Well, we have to address poverty and inequality. That's a huge one. Invest in things that give people real opportunities, like job training, affordable housing, good schools, and healthcare.
It's like building this safety net so people don't fall through the cracks and feel like crime is their only way out.
Exactly. And those investments, they need to start early. We have to support families, especially families that are dealing with, poverty or addiction.
Yeah, intervening early can really make a difference, not just for that kid, but for their whole community.
Right. Things like early childhood education, parenting classes, and mental health services that are easy to access. Those can change a kid's life.
And what about mentors? Positive role models. We talked about that before. How do we get more young people to see adults who are successful and who did it the right way?
That's so important. When a kid has someone like that in their life, someone who shows them that you can be successful through hard work, it gives them hope. It gives them something to aim for. Mentorship programs are great. Community involvement, too. And even just sharing stories of people who overcame tough times, that can make a big impact.
It's about showing them that there's another way. They don't have to turn to crime. They can achieve their dreams without hurting others or breaking the law. We haven't really talked about community much. What role does community play in all of this?
Oh, community is huge. A strong community can really deter crime. When neighbors know each other, support local businesses, and work together to keep things safe, well, it creates this sense of belonging, and it makes people think twice about committing crimes.
So it's like this culture where crime just isn't accepted. Everyone's invested in keeping the community safe and healthy.
Exactly. And we can't forget about law enforcement and the justice system, of course, but I think we need to focus more on rehabilitation and restorative justice.
So instead of just punishing people, we need to help them rejoin society and become productive members of the community.
Yeah, it's about breaking that cycle, giving people second chances, recognizing that people can change.
It all sounds really important, but it's a big task. Kind of overwhelming to think about where to even start.
You're not wrong. It's a huge challenge, but I think it starts with awareness. When we understand what causes crime, we can change the way we think about it, challenge stereotypes, and push for better solutions.
So it's up to us to learn, to talk about these things, and to demand that our leaders make this a priority.
Yeah, and we can all do our part in our own communities, volunteer at a youth center, mentor a kid, donate to groups that help families in need. Every little bit helps. Every voice against injustice makes a difference.
It's about realizing that we all have a part to play in making things better.
And the most important thing to remember is that people who commit crimes are still people. They have stories, they have families, they have dreams, and they can change.
So we need to approach this with empathy. Understand that people don't always choose this path. They're often pushed towards it by difficult circumstances.
Yeah, reducing crime isn't just about numbers and laws. It's about building a society where everyone feels valued and supported. where everyone has the chance to make good choices.
This has been a really eye-opening deep dive. We've seen some tough realities, but also some hope and some real possibilities for change.
And that's what I hope people listening take away from this. Crime is a complicated issue, but it's not hopeless. If we work together with compassion and understanding, we can make a world where there's less crime, a world where everyone has a chance to thrive.
That's a great goal to work towards. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. And remember, this isn't the end of the conversation. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep pushing for a better world.
Until next time.
This is DigitView.